I love all things fantasy, and today I'm going to show you how to make custom dragon scales. In fact, kind of would double for crockhide, maybe even river rock, kind of a pebbly look. That's coming up. Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Reitz. This is Weaver Leather Supply. Today I've got something unique for you. I'm going to show you how to use bubbles to create a scaled or pebbled effect on your leather. And this technique is so versatile. You can use it over the top of leather that you've already dyed. You can use multiple layers of this technique with different colors to get different effects. All kinds of different options here. So we're not wasting any time today, we're jumping right in. The first thing that we need to do is dampen the leather. This is going to work on veg tan. I've never tried it on anything else, so I can't vouch for that. Works really well on veg tan. The first thing we need to do is dampen it. That allows the dye and the water that we're going to be using to really permeate the leather instead of just sitting on top. So how in the world are we going to use bubbles and dye to create a scaled effect? Well, first thing we got to do is mix up our concoction here. What we're going to do is we're going to mix a 1/4 cup of water with equal parts dye and dish soap. I'm going to use a 1/4 cup, and then the dye and the dish soap, typically I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of each, pour all of those together, and then gently shake them up. 2 quick things to note here. Number one, if you over dilute it with water, you're going to end up with this real fuzzy kind of out of focus effect. Maybe you're going for that. That's not exactly my cup of tea, but the more you dilute it with water, the softer and the fuzzier it's going to be. The other thing is, within reason, the more dish soap that you put in there, the tighter and the more crisp the design is going to be. And like I said, within reason, don't go crazy. So now we know what's in our concoction, but what are we going to use to actually produce the bubbles and then apply them to the leather? Well, what we're going to use is this crazy looking thing right here. And I know it looks like something that you're probably not legally allowed to own and you might get arrested for if a cop saw you with it, but I promise you that's not what this is. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a closer look here and then I'll go through how to make it. So essentially what we've got here is a Gatorade bottle that's got a metal straw that's been pushed into it at a 45-degree angle. I was shown this at the 2022 IFOLG, that stands for International Federation of Leather Guilds show. I was shown that particular contraption at that show, and I would be happy to give credit to the guys that showed it to me, but I can't remember their names and I've lost track. But essentially what we have here is, like I said, Gatorade bottle with a straw that's been pushed into it at roughly a 45-degree angle. You can heat the end of that straw if you want to and then push it through the bottle, but that's totally on you. I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm just saying you can if you're feeling adventuresome, but I am not responsible for your boo-boos. So how do we create the bubbles and then get them on the leather? We're going to start off to one side of the leather with the bottle tipped on its side just a little bit, maybe a 45-degree angle. Then we're going to start to blow through the straw, about a medium pressure through the straw, about a medium pace generating bubbles seems to be the best. And we want to go slow and wait till the bubbles touch down before we start moving. Once they do touch the leather, we want to go really slow, because if we go too fast, what ends up happening is we drag those bubbles instead of placing those bubbles. I usually make one pass across the leather, then I'll take my hand and break that line of bubbles, then I'll go back and I'll make another pass. I've noticed that if I just try to turn and come back, what ends up happening is it pulls those bubbles and they drag and everything gets blurry and you lose the effect and it's just not good. So I just break the line, start over, and then we're good. So at this point, there's a mistake that a lot of people make when they're trying to do this, and that is that they go in and they try to pop the bubbles. They're either using their fingers or they're blowing on them or something like that. Well, what you're doing is you're shortening the amount of time that the dye stays in that pattern in contact with the leather. So what you want to do is just leave it alone, let the bubbles pop on their own, resist the urge to pop them, just wait till it happens on its own. Once all the bubbles have popped, just sit it aside and let it dry. So keep in mind, we're not just working with dye here. We've got dye that's got water and dish soap in it. So it's going to take a lot longer for it to set than it would if it was just traditional Fiebing's Pro Dye or Fiebing's dye. You really want to set it aside, let it lock in before you do anything to it. Don't try to wipe the schmutz off the top, nothing. Just sit it aside, let it dry. Now, once you set it aside and let it dry, you've got a few options. First is that you can make another pass with the same technique with a different color. Think black and green. So your scales have a primary black tone to them, but they have undertones of green, something like that. The second option is that you can dye the leather. So let's say we went across it with black dye. We've got black scales, and now we dip dye it with red. So now we've got a black and red combination going on. The other option is you can just seal it and call it a day. Now, if you set it aside and you're confident that the color's locked in, you're probably good to go with a liquid sealer. Me personally, I'd hit it with an aerosol sealer like, Leather Sheen or something like that. One thing that I would suggest to you is that you use a larger piece of leather than what your project calls for. And the reason I would suggest this, if you look at the results that we just got, you'll notice that some of the areas where the scales, the pebbles, whatever you want to call them, you'll notice that some areas are kind of fuzzy and out of focus, and other ones are really crisp and well defined. By using a piece of leather that's larger than what you need for your project, this allows you to shift it around and pick the area that you like best. So one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the video is how much I enjoy all things fantasy, whether it's Lord of the Rings or Renaissance festivals. I love all of it. My family really enjoys going to the Renaissance festivals, and part of the fun of that is making your own armor. And the technique that I showed you today is perfect for armor. In fact, next week, we're going to make a pair of vambraces. These are the Ice Dragon bracers. We're not making these, but we are going to make a pair of bracers, and we're going to use the technique that I just showed you to put a dragon scale pattern on them, and I'm going to show you how to make them three-dimensional. Well, that'll do it for this video. I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, go make something amazing.